In the bustling port city of Joppa, where merchants and travelers brought news from distant lands, there lived a woman whose kindness was known far and wide. Her name was Tabitha, also called Dorcas, and she was not a queen, a prophetess, or a ruler, just a disciple of Jesus whose life was dedicated to serving others. Unlike many women of her time who remained within the confines of their households, Tabitha moved through the streets of Joppa with a mission to care for the forgotten. She spent her days among the widows who had lost their husbands, the orphans who had no one to protect them, and the poor who had been cast aside by society. With skillful hands, she wove garments for those in need, ensuring they had warmth in the cold seasons. But her generosity extended beyond fabric and thread. She provided food for the hungry, comfort for the grieving, and a place of refuge for the weary. Her home was not just a shelter, it was a sanctuary where the broken-hearted found hope and the outcasts found belonging. Yet, few realized the personal cost of her selflessness. In an era where resources were scarce, Tabitha gave freely, never hoarding for herself. Unlike the wealthy who donated from their excess, she sacrificed what little she had, trusting that God would provide. To her, faith was not merely spoken, it was demonstrated through love in action. But then, tragedy struck. Tabitha fell gravely ill. Despite the prayers and care of those who cherished her, her condition worsened. The very people she had served could do nothing but watch helplessly as her strength faded. And then, the unthinkable happened. The woman who had been the light of so many lives took her final breath. The news spread quickly, sending waves of grief through Joppa. The very widows she had clothed now clutched her handmade garments in trembling hands, weeping bitterly. They mourned not just a friend but a lifeline, a woman who had treated them as family when no one else would. Yet, even in their sorrow, a flicker of hope remained. They had heard that Peter, the great apostle of Yeshua, was in the nearby town of Lydda. Desperate, they sent 2 men with an urgent plea, "Please, come at once." Acts 9 verse 38, they didn't know what Peter could do, but they knew they needed him there. By the time Peter arrived, the air in Joppa was thick with sorrow. The moment he stepped inside the home where Tabitha's body lay, he was met with tear-streaked faces. The widows surrounded him, holding up the tunics and garments she had sewn, tangible proof of her love and generosity. Their voices trembled as they spoke of how she had clothed them, fed them, and treated them with dignity. Peter felt the weight of their grief, but he also knew the power of the God he served. He had walked with Jesus. He had seen the dead raised before. And now, standing in this room filled with sorrow, he sensed that God was about to move once again. With quiet determination, Peter gently asked everyone to leave the room. It was not an act of coldness but an act of faith. He needed to be alone with God, just as Jesus had done when raising Jairus' daughter. As the door closed behind them, the room fell into sacred silence. Peter knelt beside Tabitha's lifeless body and prayed. This was no ritual, this was a conversation with the Almighty, a plea for the same resurrection power that had raised Jesus from the grave. Then, with unwavering authority, Peter turned to the still form before him and spoke directly, "Tabitha, arise." A breath. A twitch. And then, her eyes fluttered open. Life surged back into her body, confusion flickering across her face as she sat up. Peter extended his hand, helping her to her feet. And as if the moment weren't miraculous enough, he called the widows and believers back into the room. When they saw her standing, alive, their gasps filled the air, quickly followed by cries of joy. The sorrow that had weighed down the house shattered, replaced by awe and celebration. The news spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of Joppa. People who had doubted now believed. Those who had never encountered the power of God could no longer deny it. Many turned to the Lord in faith. Acts 9 verse 42. But Tabitha did not retreat into a quiet life after her resurrection. If anything, she was more determined than ever to serve. The garments she once made became symbols of a miracle. The people she had once comforted now sat at her feet, listening to her testimony. And when she spoke, she did not glorify herself. She pointed everyone to Yeshua, the one who held the keys to life itself. Her miracle ignited a revival in Joppa. The churches grew stronger, emboldened by the undeniable power of God. Tabitha's life became proof that serving others was not just an act of kindness, it was an act of faith. Long after her days on earth ended, her name lived on. It was whispered in gratitude by the widows she had clothed. It was spoken in awe by those who had seen her raised. It was honored by generations of believers who followed her example. Tabitha's story was never about fame or recognition. It was about a servant's heart, a faith that never wavered, and a God who is mighty to save. Her life asks us an important question: how are we using our lives to serve others? Are we living in a way that reflects the love of Yeshua? If this story inspired you, don't keep it to yourself, share it with someone who needs encouragement. And if you want to hear more powerful biblical stories, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. Stay tuned for more incredible accounts from Scripture that will deepen your faith and draw you closer to God. Until next time, remember, God sees your faithfulness, and He is not finished with you yet.